Hi, and welcome to Finding Your Cup. It is an exciting day. This is the launch of our 12 Stones Coffee podcast, and this is the very first episode. Having a podcast alongside 12 Stones Coffee was something that I have wanted to do almost since the beginning. It just took a little time to get clear direction and honestly to get over the fear of starting something that I've never done before. So that being said, bear with us. I'm sure that they'll get better as we go. But if I waited till I was perfect or even proficient at this, we'd be waiting a while. So I took that step of faith, and here we are. So yeah, I want to tell you about the name Finding Your Cup. Originally, I thought about calling it Coffee, Dreams, and Taking a Step in Faith, because that's really what opening 12 Stones Coffee House was about. But that's a little long for a podcast title. So back to the drawing board. And the idea, Finding Your Cup, came to mind. And the more I said it, the more I liked it. And here's why. I know I'm probably not the only one out there who believes that when you find a cup that you really like, what you're drinking tastes better. It just works that way. It just amps it up. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Almost every morning, I start out by drinking a doppio, which is just a fancy way to say double shot of espresso. And I'm very intentional about what cup I grab because I want the cup to fit my vision for that day. I want the cup to inspire me. Maybe the cup holds a memory and excuse me, and that is just encouraging. So the cup I chose this morning is not only special to me because it's a gift from my best friend, but I love the quote on it. So I'm going to hold it up if you can see it. It's a quote by Winston Churchill, and it says, "Never, never, never give up." And that, okay, for anyone that's ever gone after their dream or opened a small business, you know how important it is to have that resonate within you, to never, never, never give up. Because for every day when you're pursuing your dream, for every day that fulfills all your great expectations, there are probably just as many days that are so challenging and have you sometimes just thinking, like, what am I doing? And so it's so important. I'm going to hold the cup up again. So important to never, never, never give up. Because if God put the dream in your heart and He's in it, you got to have perseverance. You got to have grit. You got to never, never, never give up. You take a step of faith, and sometimes that step of faith is daily. And so, yeah, that is why I love the name Finding Your Cup. And as you can tell, I'm sure that name is kind of a metaphor for finding your dream, finding your vision. And once you find your cup, it's just as important to fill it with prayer, fill it with things that feed your vision, fill it with the people that feed your vision, just as important, because that will keep you going when the going gets tough. So that's a little bit about the name behind the podcast. I'm going to tell you about how we came up with the name for 12 Stones Coffee, and then I'm going to tie them together on really what I want this podcast, what my hope is that this podcast would be about. So I think the dream of owning my own coffee house, that seed was planted about 30 years ago when I was in college, and I was working at Creative Kitchen, which is still in the West Acres Mall in Fargo. It just looks different. It's across the hall from where it was when I worked there. When I worked at the mall, there was no big food court. And so Creative Kitchen at the time that I was working there had decided to open up an espresso bar, a coffee bar inside of Creative Kitchen. And they did it right. They brought in a roaster. I think his name was Victor Allen out of Wisconsin. And that's where my education began. That's where my love of coffee began, because honestly, up to that point, I didn't even really like coffee. The coffee I grew up around was not good. It was watered down. kind of bitter, really bitter, kind of just a step above tea and color. I mean, it wasn't good. They have good coffee there out there now, but at the time, not good. So I didn't even really think I liked coffee. But then I started to explore the world of specialty coffee, which continues to just grow and change so much. So it is exciting. But back then, I started drinking all the different espresso drinks and just fell in love with everything about it. And then as I went through my college years and my early 20s, coffee houses really became a place where I would go study, I would meet friends. I loved the community in coffee houses. I always have. And so I think that's where the seed was really planted. And then when I was in my late 20s, I moved from Minneapolis back to my hometown of Dickinson, North Dakota. And that's where I almost opened my first coffee house. It was going to be called Wind Canyon Coffee, because Wind Canyon in the Badlands of North Dakota is one of my favorite places. I am always inspired when I go there. It's still one of my favorite places. At the time, my dad was going to partner with me. We had funding all lined up. We had a spot picked out. We were just working on the lease. But it became clear that God's timing wasn't in it. That's important, right? God's timing has to be in it. Some exciting things would be happening in my life, and some really hard things at the time would start to happen. The exciting thing is I met my husband, and at that time, and we would get married within like a year and a half of that. And then also around the same time, we found out that my dad was very sick. So like I said, God's timing was not in it to open it then. My husband and I moved to Omaha, started our family there. Fast forward to about 12 years ago, around the time I turned 40, and we moved back to North Dakota to my husband's hometown area of Beulah, Hazen. Well, he's from Hazen, but if you know the area, Beulah and Hazen are really close together. So that area became our community. And that is where the concept of 12 Stones Coffee really began. We had some friends that loved the idea of opening a coffee house as well. And there's a small group of us, and we started to really cast a vision for 12 Stones Coffee. And my husband's actually the one that came up with the name, because at the time, that small group of friends, we were all part of a larger discipleship Bible study group. And what we were doing was intensively going through each book of the Bible and studying it out. And we had just finished the book of Joshua. And I think that was probably the first time I actually read that book all the way through. And it is one of my favorite books in the Bible now. So at the time, my husband was like, hey, what about 12 Stones Coffee? And we all loved it. And I'm going to tell you a story where that name comes from. So it comes from, I'm going to paraphrase it, but you can read it. It's in Joshua chapter 4. It's where the Israelites are crossing over the Jordan into the promised land. And at the time, the Jordan is in flood stage, so full of water. And here's the first thing that has to happen. The first thing is they have to take a step into that water, a step out in faith. And then God parts the waters, makes a way for them to cross over to the promised land on a dry riverbed, on dry land. And that spoke volumes to me, and still does. That oftentimes when we're following our dreams, we have to take that first step in faith, and then God begins to provide the way. And then also in that story, God commands Joshua to tell the leader of each of the 12 tribes of Israel to go back into that riverbed and to grab a stone and to build a memorial of 12 stones that would serve as a reminder, not just to that generation that crossed over into the promised land. It would serve as a reminder of God's faithfulness and that he does fulfill his promises, but it would be a reminder for future generations too. So when the younger generations started to ask, what do these 12 rocks mean? Why are they here? Then the older generation could tell them the story and encourage them with God's faithfulness and that he fulfills his promises. And that is it's so important to remember, to always remember, because we so easily forget, right? We so easily forget God's faithfulness. And so for my family and I, just our name, the name of the coffee house, 12 Stones Coffee, is a constant reminder to us of God's faithfulness. And yeah, okay, so I need to tell you how we got to Bismarck, because God's timing was not in us opening in the Hayes and Beulah area either. Life throws us curveballs, right? And so my husband had an unexpected job change, and we ended up moving to Bismarck. But I knew that the 12 Stones Coffee dream for me was still supposed to happen. I had prayed about it, and I heard so strongly God tell me in my spirit, like, no, I didn't say no. It's still going to happen. So then it just became a matter of when, right? So about a year after we had moved back, about a year after we had moved to Bismarck, I began to hear that, yeah, this is the time you need to take a step in faith. And it's funny because looking back, it was like January, February of 2020. And here we're just like entering into COVID, like the big shutdown. But God made a way, and he kept opening doors, and we kept just walking in faith. And did it look like some of those doors were going to close? Yeah, definitely. But prayed through it. And then when we knew, nope, we're still supposed to pursue it, we just had to keep taking those steps in faith. We had to, never give up. And yeah, opening your own business, those that have done it or pursuing any dream, it just takes perseverance and grit. And so that's what we did. And 12 Stones Coffee has been such an incredible blessing. It's surpassed my dreams in so many ways. It's been harder in so many ways than I ever thought. But when I go back to the people that I've gotten to meet along the way, the customers that we have, my 12 Stones Coffee team through the years, just I see blessings all around. And that brings me to this podcast. Because for 12 Stones Coffee, when we opened, we knew one thing we were never going to compromise on: the quality of coffee and the quality of service. Those were of utmost importance. But just as important was fostering community, a place of community, a place that could be a home away from home. And so through that, there's been so many people that we've met that have these inspiring stories. They've maybe started a nonprofit or are part of a ministry or have walked through something super difficult. And I just find myself so encouraged, and I wanted a way to get those stories out in greater measure. So my vision for Finding Your Cup is to bring in some of those people and to sit down with them on the podcast and to interview them, so that my prayer is that their stories would encourage those whoever would listen. And that's what I'm really excited about. So our vision going forward is to really have at least one podcast a month. The interviews will start in January, and I can't wait to see what God has in store. So that is a little bit about Finding Your Cup, a little bit about how 12 Stones Coffee came to be. And thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for listening. And until next time, remember to find your cup, fill it with what feeds your vision. And this is very important: always drink good coffee. See you later.